Hi, this is Dale Peterson, and welcome to the Unsolicited Response Show. This week actually would have been S4X21 down in Miami South Beach, hence the green screen I have behind me here. Boy, we miss it, and we miss all of you. Really looking forward to being back there next January for S4X22. But we tried to have a little fun with it since we couldn't meet in person. So what we've done is we've sent out some swag bags to 300 lucky people. We've started up the charity water campaign, which I hope you'll consider. And we've got some fun videos, one of which I'll show you in a minute here, that will remind you of what happened at S4X20 and give you something to look forward to till next January, when hopefully all this is past us. Now, one of the things that I really enjoy about the event is the chance to interview people live on stage. And last year, my favorite interview, quite frankly, was interviewing Ed Schweitzer, talking to someone who had really changed the industry and built the company. So I thought I'd do something like that for this special week. And I have Eddie Habibi, who started PAS in his house in a small room and built it to a company with many hundreds of people, 40 million plus in revenue every year, and recently acquired by Hexagon. And Eddie not only talks about how we grew the company, but how the business has changed, and really about how we can create the future, which again, is the passion that I've got for this community. So we'll get to my interview with Eddie in just a second, but before that, here's a 90-second video on what S4X20 is, and you can expect it to be even more fun, bigger, and better in 2022. Joining me on the Unsolicited Response podcast is Eddie Habibi. Eddie has had quite a career. He started in the 80s with Schlumberger while he was going to college, spent about 6 years from 87 to 93 with Honeywell, and then went and started a company that today is known as PAS. And he's been with that company, founded it, running it, put it through all its paces. I just took a little bit off your site, Eddie. With operations in over 70 countries, PAS helps many of the world's leading industrial organizations ensure OT integrity from sensor to the cloud. And then the really impressive part, including 13 of the top 15 refining, 13 of the 15 top chemical, 4 and 5 of pulp and paper, a lot of mining, a lot of power gen. So your stuff is all over the place. And then I guess just to finish the story, and we're going to go through all this, but then in November of last year, PAS was acquired by Hexagon. So it's been from an early career at Honeywell to starting a company, growing a company, and then selling a company. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. So welcome to Unsolicited Response, Eddie.
Hello, Dale. Thank you for having me on Unsolicited Response. It's great to be here with you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Well, I wanted to start really at the beginning here. So you're with Honeywell, right? And you're there for 6 years. You're an engineer. You're enjoying probably working on all these different systems around the world, pretty amazing thing. But then something caused you to say, I want to leave Honeywell. I want to start my own company. I believe with your brother at the time.
Yes, yes.
What was it? What was it that drove you to do that?
A couple of things. I had just gone through an MBA program. I think probably the most important part of it was I had this professor who at the time, I was a kid, he was in his early 70s, and he was very adamant about corporate culture and what makes for a good company. And I had grown up in an environment of entrepreneurship. My father was an independent entrepreneur, and always had the desire to do something on my own. And I saw a discrepancy between my personal beliefs in how an organization is to be run and what organizations should stand for, and what I had seen in the so-called corporate America. That was a part of it. The other part was there was a huge gap between what was needed to deploy, implement, and optimize these control systems and what the control system vendors were delivering to customers. They were doing the best they could, but they were system experts as opposed to process experts deploying these systems. So I saw a gap there and an opportunity where we could bring better services to those customers.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, both those are interesting. The first part I hadn't heard before, though. And so can you give me an example of something in corporate culture that you didn't like at the time? And I'm curious if it's still a feature of a lot of corporate culture or if the world has changed since then.
We've come a long way. The notion of democracy in the workplace was something that this professor was promoting, an idea that on its initial thought, it may seem counterintuitive or contrary to the notion of capitalism or the old expression that, corporations are dictatorships, the CEO, whatever CEO says goes. I think it is for the interest of corporations to have a democratic environment with a little d, by the way, in their workplace. Democracy in the workplace means you're paying people for their smarts. You're paying them to bring them on board to help you. So give them the tools they need and listen to them and implement the good ideas. And I didn't see that happen much in the environments we were, because there were silos. You were given an area to work in. And that I recognize economies of scale, the need for organizing by discipline and function, but something gets lost. And that has to do with the fact that we do better when we work as a team. And you're going to hear through my conversation, one of the standing rules that I have with my management team, and I've had it for a long time, is if we always agree, we don't grow. If you are on my team and you always agree with my thoughts and ideas, you're not contributing. And I can promise you, if you always agree with me, one of us is redundant. And I jokingly say, and I can promise you that's not me. I'm not the redundant one when we agree on everything. So it goes back to leveraging why we bring people together in a work community. I think that's a part of it. The other part of it is I have tremendous sensitivity to the history of work in the world. It's not just America, where gender and race has played a big factor. And over the 27 years since I have been in a position to make a difference, I've tried to bring those differences to our workplace. Make it, again, a more democratic, with little d, work environment.
And I think it has progressed since that time, but I know what you're talking about because I remember in the 90s, for about 4 years, I worked for a British company. And when I went over to the meetings in the UK, I got in a lot of trouble because I didn't always agree with the meeting, even if I was right. They said it doesn't matter if you're right. You have to, you have to agree with whatever the bosses say, and
Yeah.
that was hard to deal with. So I probably wouldn't have survived too well in some of those environments as well. Let's talk about the company. So you started it. It was originally called Plant Automation Services,
Correct.
right? The original breakdown of PAS. I know how that happens though, because like I never use the breakdown of S4 anymore. It's just S4. But Plant Automation Services was the first PAS, and I read that it was started basically in your house, in a 100 square foot room in your house, and you were doing consulting at the time.
Correct.
Did you have I mean, talk a little bit about that, but also I'm curious, did you have a vision that you were going to do a product, or when you started it, did you think you were just going to do consulting work?
No, I started because I saw a need for consulting that engaged process safety aspects, that engaged optimization of the process, as well as training and development of the users of these systems, and not just the implementation of the control systems. So there was not a big vision. I can't claim that I had a vision like a PC on every desk or at every home, or a control system that runs optimized. The thing about progress and technology innovation is that it is built upon learnings that we have and the gaps that we see as to how things could be better, plus connecting the dots between technologies that exist in different environments and bringing them together. And the story about working out of the house is true. For the first 6 months or so, there was no office. In fact, for the first 2 years, there was no office, no PAS office. My customers on the ship channel were so kind to provide us a place to work out of, but all the accounting, all the proposals were done out of the house.
Classic story. You mentioned the learning, and it was, I asked some people that have known you a long time, what I should ask you. And one of them suggested that I ask you about a learning that was important about the time you were in a control room at a refinery and the catalyst flow started to reverse. Because they said that was a huge event in your life and really affected not only you personally, but how you really, what you felt the company's mission should be, I guess. So tell us a little bit about that.
So when I first started, I was brought in to commission a control system that was migrating, was moving a fluid cat cracking unit, which is one of the most critical and most profitable units in a refinery, from pneumatics and electronics, electro-pneumatic systems to distributed control systems. And I came to know the folks in the control room, and wonderful group of people, hardworking, very knowledgeable about what they do. And a couple of things happened. There was a gas plant right next to the reactor region plant. And these were two consoles. And as the day was going on, when something would happen, alarms would come through like crazy. And the operators would say, "Hey, Eddie, we need you to sit here, just look at the alarms rolling and tell us what important alarms we need to respond to." That in itself didn't really do much for me. It just basically said, yeah, there is an alarm problem here. Until one day, just all of a sudden, a burst of alarms, maybe hundreds of them per minute, came through. And next thing I heard was someone saying, "Hey, we're about to have a reversal in the cat cracker." And the reversal is a really terrible, terrible thing that could happen. Imagine tons of catalyst heated to close to 950, 1,000 degrees that are supposed to go in one direction, not having enough pressure behind it, moving the other way, and going into an environment with hydrocarbons at that same similar temperature with air being introduced to it at the same time, massive amounts of air. It is almost like a small tactical thermonuclear bomb if it goes off. And we've had a couple of those accidents around the world. Anyway, somebody screamed, reversals come in, and I turned around and there's this 320-pound guy named Larry was running faster than Carl Lewis. Carl Lewis at the time was the world record holder, 100 yards. And that brought the problem of process safety home to me, how critical it is. This guy had to run, and we were fortunate that day. He got out there fast enough to take control of the valve, to turn it and get things in control. That right there hit me really hard in that this is a dedicated group of people who spend their lives in these dark control rooms, 12 hours a day, 8 hours a day, whatever their shift is, 24/7, providing for us, the guys sitting in the corporate offices, the guys working in other places, and what have you, software developers, salespeople, the energy, the plastics that we need to improve the quality of life for us. And I thought to myself, what can we do at PAS to help the quality of life for these folks, as well as to help them succeed? Because immediately what you realize, very much similar to the pilots on a passenger plane, you want these guys to have boring and uneventful days. And that really set the stage for me as to what we needed to do. And it was very well received by our customers that our focus was going to be safety first for our customers.
So this happened when you had already started PAS?
This happened in 1993, 1994. I can't tell you the exact day, but I have a visual of that day. And I still know the guys. I still visit that particular refinery from time to time. There are a couple of the guys who are still there, who are still working there in that control.
Were you, at the moment it happened, I'm sure afterwards you were like, man, that almost went really bad. But at the moment it was happening, did you realize what was happening and quite frankly, the jeopardy to your life that you had at the time?
I did, because I'd learned about the process. I'd learned about how a cat cracker works. I'd learned about how a refinery works and how critical of these processes are. I knew, but I really didn't quite understand it until we saw a few accidents, terrible accidents. In 1989, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, at a conference, and I got a call. Actually, this was 1999. Same company, 10 years later. It happened in 89. It happened in 99 again. A resin plant blows up. The whole neighborhood shakes for miles away. I got a call from the house that, hey, the house just shook. What's going on? And it brings it home. And then the incident at Texas City, at the large refinery in Texas City, that makes you feel like we're on a very important mission.
Well, and it's one of those things. It's not even always just these big things. It can be, a single person fatality because they weren't paying attention. I know if you've been in the business for decades, you go through all these safety briefings. Every time you visit another site, there's another safety briefing. They tend to be poorly produced, and after a while, human nature is just to almost shut down a little bit. Okay, I got to check this off. But then every couple of years, you'll visit a place where someone said, everyone's a little somber when they walk into an area because Steve or Carl or somebody died there 6 months ago or something like that. And it really brings it home when you see this, that it's real world stuff. It's not just, playing in a data center, which is a big deal. Let's talk a little bit then. So at some point, and I guess, again, I was trying to reconstruct history a little bit here. You should tell your team at PAS to put up a good corporate history on the site, because I always enjoy seeing those. And your site is very, let's say very modest. You just say started in 1993 and such. But it looks like in somewhere around 1996, you had your first product, the Doc 3000, which was an asset management product. And
Yes,
what was really strange to me about that is it appears that it was really designed for the Honeywell system. So
correct.
essentially, you got a Honeywell system. Here's an add-on to make it work better in the sense you'll know what's on your network. Why didn't Honeywell just do that? Because they
You
ended
know,
up reselling it, right? Didn't they? Why didn't Honeywell decide to do that?
this is absolutely true story. That question that you asked for the first for the first 2 3 years, it was being asked of me and of Honeywell. Why didn't you guys do this? The answer is simple. It's an afterthought. It is not something that you develop when you build a control system. A control system is very complex and it is intended to do one thing and one thing only, and that is control and optimize the process and keep the bad stuff in the pipes or the good stuff and prevent safety issues from happening. It is not about how do we simplify the management of these systems. It's for the same reason that the automation companies didn't think about cybersecurity. Others came, others like yourself and Ralph and other friends of ours in the industry came about and thought, hey, there is an issue here we need to address. And for me, it was self-serving. It was honestly part of my weakness. I was trying to make up for a weakness. This is what I would call incidental inventions, right? Mm. We were doing these projects, these systems integration projects of these very complex systems, and the customer was expecting that we would deliver documentation at the end of the project. So the project would be $100,000. We would put aside 15, 20 grand for complete documentation using CAD operators and what have you. And so this is crazy. I don't like documenting systems. I like programming them. I just wasn't a very diligent engineer to sit down and do documentation. I've never come across one who was. Mm-hmm. Engineers like to solve problems, not do mundane things. So we came up with an idea to take the entire configuration of these control systems, which were very proprietary. You could not get a readout. You had to expose it in binary code and try and understand it. With the knowledge we had of the Honeywell control system, we took the data out and rebuilt it in a Windows environment, which made the documentation of it very easy. And that was the start of it. And immediately, like within a few months after that, we connected the dots between process safety management, which is an OSHA regulation, 1910-119, which includes a very important factor, and that is management of change. We said, wow, we now have the basis to provide an MOC solution, a management of change solution. And this thing became like wildfire in the industry, became very popular. So it was the idea. And then, of course, I brought a gentleman who is an amazing technologist by the name of Dennis Ahrens. I brought him on board. This is an absolutely true story. I told him, look, I'd hired a contractor, paid him 20 grand to build this prototype for me. I think he had used a programming language called Delphi. Don't throw this code away. I want you to use it. Then I said, sure. Within 3 months, we had an executable. I went and showed it to 5 sites in Corpus Christi, came back with an order. And then years later, like 10 years, 20 years later, then I asked Dennis how much he used that code. He said 0. He threw it away and started over.
Probably a good move based on what I've seen of products that start on first gen code.
Yes.
Better to start out clean. Well, okay, so then I'm going to jump forward to when the company started to get more involved in security.
Yes.
Back around, I put it around somewhere around 2013, but you actually did quite a bit between then, in those first 20 years. So it said in the first 10 years, you grew to a company of 70 people from 100 square feet in your house to 70 people, which is a huge accomplishment. You started an alarm management product line. You started a high performance HMI product line. It looks like you acquired at least one company,
Yes.
DOT Products, in 2003. So before we switch over to the security stuff, I'm just curious. This is a question I stole from Tim Ferriss that he likes to ask. But you had 2 decades of work there. Was there something in those 2 decades that you would call your favorite failure, where you were trying to do something, it didn't work, but it really taught you something or put you in a position to do something else? What was your favorite failure in the first 20 years?
That's a great question. It really is. My favorite failure, the biggest learning was, and I'll tell you this, the takeaway. The takeaway is be focused. Don't get into technologies you personally or your company doesn't know very well. There was a fantastic company and a great technologist who had built a company by the name of Dot Products that, it's a long story, another time, another location. Mike Morshidi is an amazing mathematician, one of the greatest mathematicians of our time, who had developed a technology. The technology just happened to be very complex. It is for nonlinear control processes like polymers, which are extremely difficult to manage and optimize. We acquired the company with the intention of leveraging that company for abnormal situation management related to process safety. But the technology was not really defined for that, it was not designed for that. It was designed for plant optimization. It was designed for startups and shutdowns, what we call transitions. And after 2 years of feeding it, we had to divest of it. And I take full responsibility for it. It was my failure, not seeing that the technology was too complex for us to implement in the area we wanted it to implement. And we didn't really want to lose focus of our mission, which was process safety and then optimization. Anyway, we ended up divesting of that business.
And just to pull on that a little bit, was it that it was too complex or too different than what you did? What was the main lesson? Like, if you were looking at another acquisition, what would be the red flag that would say, don't do another Dot? What was it specifically?
It was twofold. One is that particular market that product served is still today very complex. It is more complex. I'll venture to say, and I'm going to get a few rocket scientists all stirred up, it is more complex than rocket science, because you're trying to control very highly combustible materials to which you have no visibility. You can't put measurements, sensors inside of these reactors to measure what's going on inside of them, and they're nonlinear, which means they don't respond linearly to external stimuli, temperature, pressure, etc., flow. So it is a complexity of it. The market size was very small relative to the broader market. So complexity is part of it, but also it was a deviation from what we had defined to be our core competency, which is process safety, bringing better situation awareness to the control room.
Okay. Well, I was going to say then to jump to when you did cybersecurity, which again, it was somewhere circa 2013. But as I was looking at this, in a sense, you've always done cybersecurity, even back with the DOC 3000, because if we look like at the NIST framework, the first function is identify, right? And now everyone is talking about cybersecurity having management of change, having an asset inventory, all the things that version 1.0 of your very first product did. So yeah. I thought maybe a better question was around that 2013 timeframe, and you created a business unit for cybersecurity in 2015. Was it a repositioning, more of a repositioning of what you had, or was it truly looking at a new type of product? Like alarm management was a new type of product.
Absolutely.
But was security more repositioning or just actually a new type of product like alarm management?
Yeah. I'll answer your question in just a little bit, but I'll give some background. I've
Sure.
always viewed our business as first to market. This is a belief I had from day one. We are, as a small company, you're not good at making a better mousetrap. What you're trying to improve upon existing products, what you want to do is just come to market with something brand new. And alarm management was one of those products. We were the first shrink wrap software to the market, and we pretty much, as niche as that software market is, we have been the number one in that market for the longest time. The other was automation asset management, what we now call asset inventory for automation systems, for OT. We developed that honestly, without knowing that it was going to end up being a security solution back in '96.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened, fast forward, you look for opportunities for products that you already have where you can expand that market. Cybersecurity happens to be one of those areas where we expanded an existing product to give us that new market presence. The fact of the matter is, back in 2007, what is now AFPM, American Fuels and Petroleum Manufacturers Group, which back then was called NPRA, invited me to sit on a panel to talk about cybersecurity in 2007. It was fascinating at that time, and I went away and put some slides together and took it to three of our clients at the time, all three majors, refining companies, and brought up the challenges of cybersecurity. I had 5 or 6 slides shared with them. These were engineering automation leaders for their respective organizations at the corporate level. And they looked at it, they nodded, they said, yeah, we see these challenges, but we really don't have these problems. We have our automation folks taking care of these systems, backing them up regularly. And most of our systems are also isolated. They're firewalled or they're islanded, and it's not a problem. And of course, we were approaching to solve a problem that we thought it existed. They didn't see it as such. We went away until, of course, Stuxnet hit and a few other things happened. And then it was around 2011, actually, one of our great customers, one of the early adopters, fantastic people, a large electric company in southeastern US, approached us and said, look, we're using your integrity software. At the time it was called Automation Integrity. We're using your Automation Integrity to manage our diverse automation assets, from Honeywell to Invensys to Emerson systems. And we see that you have all the configuration. We need you to do a few incremental things to help us meet these new NERC SIP compliance requirements. And of course, we teamed up with them, and about 2013, we saw the market just ripe for us to enter the market. And it was really interesting. At the beginning, we would show up in conferences and we would submit papers, and people would ask us, what are you guys doing here at a cybersecurity event? You're an automation asset management company. And of course, that was when cybersecurity was viewed primarily as, threat intel or, white listing and
Sure.
antivirus, etc.
Well, and I should point out, so as I saw, 2013, starting to name the products with security, creating actually a business unit in 2015. And while I say you took a product and repositioned it, you also have added things like vulnerability management and a variety of other things, probably along the lines of what that and other customers have asked for. They said, hey, your product's great, but it would be even better if it could do this to help us with security. I've written and spoken a lot about the asset management and detection marketplace and my views on that. As someone with skin in the game and a participant in it, how would you categorize what market segment is the integrity, the cyber integrity product in, and who would be your competitors? Are they the folks? Do you compete with people like Dragos and Nozomi, or is it more the industrial vendors themselves or MDT? How do you see the market?
That's a really good question, and we're often asked that by our customers as well. The security stack is rather deep, as you well know. And because of the way we have approached it, different companies have ended up developing their niche in different parts of the stack. We entered into this market not as a security, but as an asset management company. And we continue to focus on what we call foundational security. Foundational security, in our definition, is having an accurate inventory, understanding what's lacking, what patches are not there, understanding vulnerabilities, being able to recover is an extremely, extremely important thing. You look at solar winds right now. If you're hit hard, you've got to be able to wipe and recover. Do you have what you need to wipe and recover? This is one area that we have done really well in. And then, of course, we've added vulnerabilities, dashboards, and other things to it. We see that separate from network monitoring, which happens to also provide some level of asset inventory. It could, in fact, complement what we do. In terms of names that you pointed out, many of those folks are friends. Rob Lee at Dragos, they do a good job on threat intel. We don't do what they do, and they don't do what we do, and we openly talk about that. Whether it's Clarity or Nozomi or others, we do different things, and the market is big enough for all of us to play in that. So I don't see any one of them as a direct competitor to PAS. What I do see, though, is we complement one another, and occasionally there is some overlap. Now, is there competition? Yeah. Over the last 3 to 5 years, the competition hasn't been on buy this product versus that. It's been, where do you allocate your budget? Which one do you buy first?
Yeah. Well, and I'm not going to repeat everything. I'll link in the show notes to a lot of my analysis, but I've seen a lot of people making mistakes saying, I've got one pot of money. Is there something that can do both? And I'm in the camp that there are two different solutions that need to talk to each other.
Precisely.
But your asset management is your single source of truth.
Yes.
And should be getting updates from the detection system and should be sending information to the SOC so they know what's out there in their response. So again, I'll link to that in the show notes. Let's look at the market from a different perspective. So obviously, I mentioned at the beginning, but you and your team deserve great congratulations. You got acquired in November, I believe, of last year by Hexagon, a Swedish company, which makes you a little less of the pure play that you were, although you were never really a pure security play because you did alarm management and other things. And then we had another data point with Dragos raising $110 million of funding, which means at least the people investing in them think there's going to be multi-billion-dollar companies in this marketplace. Yes. So I guess my question is to you is, do you think there's going to be large standalone OT security companies, or do you think they're going to be integrated into companies that do a variety of things, and maybe why?
That's a good question. I think just short answer is we will see both. You will see companies like Hexagon, PAS, who will have solutions to deal with asset management. And I don't mean just cyber asset management, but also physical pumps, compressors, and reactor asset management, as well as cyber asset management, design and documentation, who have a security solution. This is our case. And then you will see standalone companies like Dragos or Clarity who will have nothing but focus on that security. And One thing I've learned in my 40 years in the industry is that predicting the future, especially as to where the technology goes, is a fool's game. But I venture to say that we will see a handful of the network companies grow beyond where they are right now. I know we've been through tremendous consolidation, as you've been predicting for the last 3 years. But I do see a play for companies like Hexagon, and I should clarify, the reason we selected Hexagon to acquire us is because they have the ability to expand our capabilities. We are being stood up as a fifth line of business, fifth division, if you want to call it, of Hexagon, actually under their American division of PPM, Hexagon PPM, whose original product is Intergraph. Hexagon PPM is deep within the industrial sector here in the US. So the customer base is there, and their focus on this cyber arena is going to give them an expansion without having to reinvent the wheel, if you will. And it is relevant because everything they do is in the cloud, it's in data. They're a software company, so starting with them protecting their data, and then what they bring to our customers, protecting that, is also very important. So back to why Hexagon. We selected Hexagon over the original path that we took, which was let's go raise money and continue to grow the company, because they have the ability to acquire other companies. This is a company that has acquired 120 companies over the last 20 years. That's unprecedented. I had a hard time dealing with that. They are incredible at that. So they're very good at that. And they have the means to help augment our solution base. The other part of it is that they have reach. We could have taken money, hired technologists to expand our technology footprint, hired sales and marketing people to go to market. But as you've seen, that takes time, and it's not necessarily a linear path. With Hexagon, overnight, we're going from the 20 plus salespeople that we had to over 150 salespeople. They have a technology team that is phenomenal, that's already taken everything to SaaS and to the cloud. Their CTO is so inspiring. Melanie Eakes has been a source of inspiration to me. Teaming up with them on technology, where they have the, if you will, the genealogy of the plant hardware. We match that up with the genealogy of automation. That data, our customers realize it, we realize it, that data together is going to transform this industry. So that leads to what my job is going to be going forward. I'm really excited about the coming together, the merging of our two companies.
Well, I think a company that has successfully acquired other companies like that is always a good sign, because it's difficult to, it's a skill, you know, like so many things, acquiring companies is a skill an organization has to develop. They have to get some reps in, develop that muscle. It's rarely done well the first time. So that is a positive sign. I guess from a personal note, you know, you've been on your own since 1993. What's it been like not being CEO of, I guess you're still probably in charge of the division, but what's it like working for another company the last 2 months or so? Is there, if you want to stay positive, you could say your favorite thing about it, but what are your thoughts on it?
Nothing has changed for me. Maybe it's too early to tell, but one of the reasons we selected Hexagon, it is truly their culture. If you've been around me, and our customers know this, very openly I share with our customers, executive customers, I tell them they come second, customer second. And of course, it's counterintuitive. It's an attention getter. The fact of the matter is, we couldn't be where we are without our employees. If our employees are not happy with what they're doing, if they're not satisfied, if they're not engaged, if they're not challenged, they won't take good care of our customers. So we saw a similar culture with Hexagon. We saw an openness. We saw diversity. It's a Swedish company, but you can see every ethnicity, every race, every nationality, every religion in the company. But more importantly than those things, and that this has been our view, diversity of thought, asking people to share their ideas and picking the best ideas to move forward. That really has helped, and I'm excited about it. So going forward, I'll share this with you. I'm not going to miss all the administrative stuff that as a CEO, as a details-oriented CEO, I had to do. I'll be focusing on what excites me and inspires me the most, and that is our customers, spending time with them, listening to their ideas and their challenges, and then going back and looking at the data that we have, the data that Hexagon Technologies have, to see how we can connect the dots to come up with the next innovation to bring to market.
Okay, I want to ask you two quick questions here. Well, I don't know. I'll try to make them quick. One more on the market. You have experience from both sides working with people like Honeywell and Foxborough and all these sorts. What do you think their level of success will be in selling security products and services into the market? Because again, it's sort of this offshoot of, it's not their main line of things. How do you think they'll do over the next 5 years or so?
I'll make the answer really short. It'll be very similar to the historian market. Every automation vendor has a historian of sorts, of their own brand. But the market leaders are two, OSI and Aspen Tech. Okay. So to that end, there will be cybersecurity players, and then there is the automation suppliers. The automation suppliers will have security solutions, which they will focus primarily on their market, on their customers. So I don't know if that answers it.
No, that's a great answer. I might steal that. That's so good, but I'll give you credit if I steal it. So then I want to finish with a little bit of a future question, and I'm going to go back to something I found in a 2012 interview. You were talking about this concept of human reliability.
Yes.
And you said, this is a little bit of a quote I'll read here, human reliability is the science and technology that enables us to minimize human error. Human reliability is that element that when it fails leads to incidents and abnormal situations in the plant. The reason it's important, we believe the human element is the most important element in a manufacturing environment. And at the time you said 42% of all industrial incidents can be attributed to human error. And you talked then about alarm management, and 67% of the alarms were unnecessary. And you see how that really fit in with your product. My question is, going forward now, we're almost a decade later, and we've now got more automation, and we're seeing machine learning. I mean, it's still a little more buzzword than reality, but we're seeing the possibilities of it, at least, of it really taking over. So do you think this human reliability is going to become less important? If the humans make mistakes, are really bad things going to happen, or is that 42% going to shrink down to 15, 10, or 5, or is it going to grow? What's your view on that?
I think human reliability will forever be a risk and a threat to safe operations, safe and productive operations. Automation is a solution to that. Automation, whether it is taking the operator out of the startup and shutdown of a plant, or taking the pilot out of the takeoff and landing when most accidents happen. Automation will help. Same. And actually, when there is failure, a different kind of automation comes to help. That's the safety instrumented system that kicks in and saves the day. So we have to continue to automate. Automation is good. But that human failure element will always be there. And I think it'll go down because I look at autonomous vehicles. I look at the car I drive. I drive a Tesla. I've been driving a Tesla since 2013. That car drives itself when I have it in autopilot better than I do. And I'm not a bad driver. So I think automation will save a lot of lives, especially when we have these massive trucks on the streets being automatically driven and controlled and self-aware of other vehicles around them. That will lead to a different economic issue, social economic issues that we have to deal with. I'd love to talk about that some other time because it is an emerging problem we have to deal with. The unemployment that will come with that autonomous future, if you will. But that's a separate conversation. You didn't ask about that. I think there will be a reduction in human error because we make up for it through automation, but it has to always be there. And it is the responsibility of technology companies as well as regulating authorities to make sure that the human element is always kept in the forefront of technology development.
Okay, interesting. So I just want to thank you for being on the show and really congratulate you as a small business owner that has remained small. I haven't built the tremendous organization you have, but I just really appreciate and respect what you and the team have been able to accomplish over the last almost 3 decades. And I think the Hexagon move looks like it makes a lot of sense, so we'll be watching that carefully. If the listeners or the viewers wanted to get in touch with you, are you active on any social? What would be the best place if they wanted to reach out to you? Are you LinkedIn, Twitter?
I'm on both. I'm on LinkedIn, Eddie Habibi, EIS, and I am on Twitter at Eddie Habibi.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Eddie.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. And I hope 2021 ends up being a great year for all of us.
Well, that's the show. I want to thank my guest, Eddie Habibi of PAS, which is now part of Hexagon. If you have a question, and we'd like to include questions at the end of these shows, you can actually record the audio of your question. Just go to dale-peterson.com. On the right side there, you'll see something that says record your question. Just click on that. Very simple. I'll get your question. We'll use some of them on the show. And any I don't use on the show, I'll respond to personally. So please do that. If you don't want to record your question, you can send in questions, comments, suggestions for guests or topics, things you don't like about the show, to s4@digitalbond.com. And I'll talk to you next time. Something warrants an unsolicited response.